Thanks everybody for joining us today. This is Justin Beals, the CEO and co-founder of StrikeGraph, and I'm really happy to be joined by a technology partner of ours that we've been working with, 12 Tech, and Syed. Syed, would you take a second to introduce yourself for us?
Hi, I'm Syed Shah. I'm the CEO and founder of 12 Tech. We are a DevOps and development consulting company.
Excellent, Syed. It's a pleasure to meet you. And just a little background for Syed's audience that's joining us today. I'm the CEO and co-founder of StrikeGraph, and StrikeGraph focuses on helping companies achieve security compliance, things like a SOC 2 audit or ISO 27001 certification. Syed, you and I started talking quite a bit because one of the very shared territories that we deal with in compliance and also technology is DevOps. And it's a little bit of a murky space, although I feel like it's getting better definition lately. Yeah. And you guys are experts in this type of work. That's obviously the service that you provide. Maybe you could just kick us off a little bit by a description of what DevOps is and what the current state of DevOps is.
Yeah. So DevOps in general is a combination of your mindset, cultural philosophies, and tools and automation. So all of this combines into this big umbrella term that we call DevOps.
And it's in service of software engineers, right? Pretty much everything they do is to help facilitate efficient use of
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, since DevOps has evolved so much, and it's been more than a decade of DevOps, right? Yeah. Now it's just something, it's just a way how you do things. It's not something separate. Teams who do it well, evolved teams, this is just how they do things, the CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure as code, everything, it's just how things are done.
Yeah, I remember back in the days as a software engineer myself where, we had to understand a lot about the systems administration, like how the database would get deployed or, even racking hardware and firewalls. Yeah. And then it was very static. We had systems administrators and, they would go in and flip a switch or repower a unit. Yeah. But now you said a phrase that I think is critical for understanding why this role is different, which is infrastructure as code. That's a pretty massive switch in how we think about servers and networking equipment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a combination of how our mindset has changed and how tools have evolved within DevOps. Like you were saying, previously there used to be servers and there used to be system administrators. And then we used to build all these scripts that would, try to automate the deployment, right? But now, since these tools have come in that support infrastructure as code, now we have real infrastructure as code with, with these all these tools that are out there. Yeah.
Yeah, and we push it right to the cloud, right? I mean, we write up code that defines the server, and that gets run by Amazon or Microsoft and any other cloud provider, and essentially deploys that hardware. It's a lot different from the days of a screwdriver that I remember and plugging in RJ45 cords up and down a rack. Yeah.
So your entire infrastructure, that's the beauty of this. Your entire infrastructure is in the form of a code, right? You can put it in. So actually, that's what we do. We put it in source control. We get revisioning. We can run, scans on it. The SCSC stuff we can run on infrastructure as code templates as well. And then you just feed this into these cloud providers, AWS, Azure, right? And then they just kind of provision your entire infrastructure for you.
I mean, this is a huge help for security and compliance, but it can also be a big danger too, right? It both creates like new issues for security as well as opportunity to remove human failure out of the mix a little bit. Yeah.
So the way I see DevOps is basically there is one aspect which helps with security, right? Which is the automation, right? And all of that part. But then there is the other aspect of DevOps, which is being agile and deliver things at a rapid pace, right?
Right.
with security, it doesn't basically, it's not going to slow us down if we do the security the right way, right? But it's just something that we need to understand that while we want to deliver at a rapid pace, we cannot compromise on security. And there
Yeah.
are things in place that there are best practices. If we do that, we can achieve that. For example, if your entire infrastructure is as a code, you are sure every time you're going to spun up an infrastructure, it would follow the best practices. And whatever the compliance requirements are, it would follow that, right? And there's another term within DevSecOps called policy as code. That's another thing that helps with security and compliance.
Also, I think that one of the things that's been really intriguing about DevOps is that the ability to respond to breaches and incidents has been pulled back into an organization much more effectively. I have a military colleague, and he talks all the time about important security being able to delete and redeploy assets really quickly. And the new DevOps tools that we design in infrastructure and code, it kind of gives you that ability to design an incident response plan that clears the decks a little.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the other aspect to DevOps is, building monitoring and notifications and alarms, right? So all of that plays into what you are mentioning, being able to respond to these incidents and mitigate.
That's an intriguing, that monitoring is a major portion of a SOC 2 audit. It's a major portion of ISO 27001 certification. And a lot of times we hear about packaged monitoring solutions where, just let us have access to your cloud and we'll do all the monitoring you need. I think as an ex-chief technology officer, a role I've played in the past, that terrifies me a little bit. Isn't it important for you to work with your either DevOps vendor like 12 Tech or your DevOps leader on site with the type of monitoring that is successful for that organization?
Absolutely. Because every application, every workload is different. So there is no one size fit all. There are certain things that you can get out of the box with solutions like these, but then, you need to have workload specific things to actually monitor and put alarms on and all of that.
And I know in none of those standards, none of the standards that we read, is there any specific about what you're supposed to monitor. I think the assessment groups and certifying bodies, the ISO authors, the AICPA and the SOC 2 standards realize that they can't pigeonhole, your technology operations, DevOps specifically, as much as give it a measuring tool to stack up to. So I dissuade people all the time from thinking that the standard specifies exactly what you need to do, as much as gives you some guardrails for working with, your current team to set up the best security.
Yes, absolutely.
I think culturally, one of the things that's changed at StrikeGraph for our DevOps team, and I'm curious if you and your customers work in this way, is that the DevOps role is being asked more and more questions about what the best security is. Do you find that it's important for 12 Tech and DevOps in general to participate in that discussion? For instance, if product is really wanting to push a feature, we will sometimes ask our DevOps engineers how they feel about the security of that feature early on in the design process.
Yeah, absolutely. So security first mindset. Just like with DevOps, it's a mindset, it's a culture as well, as much as the tools and automation.
Yeah.
Same goes for security, right? And security cannot be after the fact thing anymore, right? It needs to be how you do things, just like with DevOps. It needs to be how you do things. So what we do and what we promote and is basically you start with security when you are architecting your application, right? When you're architecting your feature or your solution, and you start with security. Security starts from the developers. So your development team needs to get trained in security. Your architects obviously needs to be experts in security. So when we are designing the solution, security is there, right?
Yeah. And I know we lean on, especially our DevOps team, for discussions about some of the technical parts like encryption, how to handle network segregation, sometimes logical separation. I know one of the recommendations that came from DevOps for us is a new VPN and to work with a virtual private network for a systems access. I'm sure you guys must participate in conversations like that with all of your customers, a critical contribution.
Absolutely. So basically segregation of your networks, your private subnet, your public subnet, your virtual private network, the VPC, and encryption at rest, encryption in transit, also building, monitoring, capturing the events, and then building dashboards, and then building notifications on top of it. So,
and now that we're, when we're in an automation scenario, right? Like let's say we have a CI/CD continuous deployment, we're automating the deployment of software, and the DevOps team has made our software developers very efficient in getting, that feature through the pipeline. Then I also think that where the vulnerability comes is in that code, right? So DevOps needs a good quality assurance practice. They need to be tested regularly. Do you recommend penetration testing?
Absolutely. Penetration testing, SAST, that's one of the things when we build a CI/CD pipeline for our customers. SAST, automated testing, all of that is part of that, right? Yeah. Once you have the CI/CD pipeline, now you can start adding in automation for that, automation for SAST, penetration testing, and all of this nice stuff.
And it's very valuable. I think those that may not have developed a product in the past to understand that when a developer is working on a feature and they're able to rapidly deploy that software and see it on a server and look at it, all of a sudden you kind of, you have the time to market for some of your features. Yeah.
Now since DevOps have evolved, right? So your branching strategy has become so much simplified and it's so different. Previously, we used to have these some people who would take care of branching and releasing the code. Yeah. But now there's a new term called truck-based branching strategy. And that is basically you work on something, you push it, and the CI/CD pipeline is actually going to go ahead and deploy it in production. So short and fast releases, right? And that basically facilitates what you were mentioning, being able to rapidly release features to production.
It's excellent. So just a couple of key takeaways, I think. Like the first one, one thing we've highlighted is how critical DevOps is, not only to product delivery, but thinking about securitization. I think developing, infrastructure as code so that you can rapidly deploy. And some of the more modern security techniques definitely rely on having DevOps in place, right? Like I think, just some basic things like automated patching or handling the issue of server updates and things like that. Yeah. Having a good DevOps practice is just going to resolve a lot of those security controls for you. Not only that, you get product to market sooner because your engineers are more efficient because you created code for them to operate on top of. It's just a much more robust ecosystem. Now, one of the vulnerabilities to be aware of is that you've implemented all this automation. You need to make sure that you have good quality control over that so that an error isn't introduced at scale, right? A security challenge or something like that. Yeah. Well, Syed, I really enjoyed leaning on your expertise about DevOps and developer security ops. Having had to be a system administrator in the past, I'm so glad to see some of this infrastructure as code thing and these innovations in computer science coming to bear in the market. And we really appreciate you joining us for this expertise. We'd love to do it again sometime.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Good. All right. Have a great day, everybody.